Okay, so today I'll be very briefly discussing 1984's Greystoke, the Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes. I've discussed a couple of Tarzan films on the program, Tarzan the Fearless 1933 and Tarzan and the Leopard Woman 1948. I have a degree of fondness for those films. I like the idea of the Tarzan mythos in general as put forward by Edgar Rice Burroughs, although I think it's fair to say that the appeal of the earlier films of certainly the Johnny Weissmuller era and up to and including the films of the 1950s, the 60s was arguably a little bit of a different story. But yeah, those, the me Tarzan, you Jane sort of archetype, this is, a far cry from the more intellectual warrior wit Tarzan, which is presented to some degree later in the Weissmuller era. Certainly in the Leopard Woman, Tarzan and the Leopard Woman, he's portrayed as quite a smart combatant, if you will. So what I'm trying to say is, there were many reasons I found to enjoy the Tarzan film adaptations, even though I didn't exactly take the source material seriously. One attempt in the 1970s came along that did try to take Edgar Rice Burroughs' mythology rather seriously, to the point where they did not want to title the film Tarzan, they wanted to title it Lord Greystoke, which, as you may know, this is before they crashed, were shipwrecked off the coast of Africa. Tarzan's family was Greystoke. That's his family name. Attached to write this project was the most acclaimed screenwriter, who is not known as a director, perhaps, one Robert Towne. Chinatown is arguably the most revered film screenplay of all time, and he was assigned to write a serious, contemplative Tarzan screenplay. Lord Greystoke, I should say. Robert Towne became so invested in this screenplay that he became convinced that the only way his vision could be actualized by a filmmaker is if he was that filmmaker. Robert Towne intended to make his directorial debut initially with Lord Greystoke. However, he ended up working on another film in the meantime. I don't remember what it's called. It's a sports picture which was released in 1982. Give me a moment. Personal Best. That's what it's called. It bombed hard. Anyway, as a result of, in order to finish Personal Best, Towne had to sign over his interest, his financial interest, his shares in the production of Lord Greystoke. And so that was that for Towne's involvement with the film by the early 1980s. And so then assigned to direct the film was one Hugh Hudson. Hudson had made an enormous splash with 1981's Chariots of Fire, one of the most iconic British films of all time to this day. I don't know if I've ever actually watched it. I always just kind of dismissed it as some Oscar bait. I mean to actually watch it because I do have a certain fondness for... the music's beautiful, obviously. And there's just something about... I don't know, I've always wanted to... Even though I've never seen the film, I'd love to run across the beach in some white shorts with the Vangelis music playing. And there's something I love about cliche British media and a kind of English consensus, late 20th century English consensus of, looking back at our old work and just having a good smile at this and that, this great moment. Oh yes, that was a classic. That's a British classic. Like, there's something about it. I'm Australian. I don't know if it's kind of absurd that I feel that way. Well, we've got a kind of rubbish, young bloody history by comparison. So I suppose I have to look at my ancestry for something intriguing. So Hugh Hudson was attached to direct Lord Greystoke, The Legend of Greystoke, whatever it's fucking called. And while this film may have... While some of its potential, the prospect of it being directed by in Robert Towne's case, it would have been debut feature film, and in Hudson's case, I believe it's his second feature film after Chariots of Fire. Although, fortunately, they had the most venerated veteran cinematographer to work on this production, John Alcott. John Alcott of 2001: A Space Odyssey and Barry Lyndon fame. That John Alcott, the chap who used NASA cameras in order to make Barry Lyndon look as pristine as it does. So in 1984, Greystoke was released, and to be honest, it's not a film I hear about that much. Some of the older Tarzan films were remembered to some extent in the popular culture, if not because you'd see them on weekend daytime television, be it Johnny Weissmuller or be it one of the colour films from the 1960s, Tarzan and the Great River, for example, which I saw bits of on telly as a child. And then, of course, that horrible Disney film with the terrible Phil Collins soundtrack is quite well known these days because it's the Disney animated film. Terrible Renaissance era, generally terrible Renaissance era, and yet there's this quite serious Tarzan film released with great production values that has been really, it's not a recognized entry popularly in the Tarzan cinema canon. Tarzan on film is tended to be, I feel, people tend to think of it as, me, Tarzan, Eugene era of the 30s, maybe some mention toward how scandalous the skinny dipping was at the time in Tarzan and his mate, and then, continuing films up and through the 40s, 50s, 60s, and then some people may remember an attempt to reboot the franchise in 2016 with The Legend of Tarzan, directed by David Yates, starring, I believe, Alexander Skarsgård, and I think that film that film was essentially a 2016 era Greystoke, more or less. But that film bombed. Whereas Greystoke apparently was a commercial success. There's nothing that indicates that it was a bomb. Certainly personal bests on record as being a huge bomb. And you'd think Greystoke we'd have reports of that being a bomb because someone would want to write about all the money they wasted and burnt up on the screen because there's a lot of it being spent, and if it didn't make a profit, someone would be bragging and teasing them about it in the media. But hey, I can't find any sources for that. I've been improving this particular episode in case you couldn't tell because I just feel like it today. I'm just having a good time. Why not? In my opinion, this is actually a terrific little film. John Alcott's cinematography is beautiful. I think the seriousness of the production is a thing to behold, aesthetically and narratively as well. I think this is a really gripping picture. I'd highly recommend everyone watch this. Well, if you're a casual audience member, you might find the whole Tarzan thing a bit silly. I don't blame you. It's goofy pulp from Edgar Rice Burroughs, the master of it, the father of it, in many might suggest, popularly anyway. But for serious film fans, you're not going to turn down a film shot by John Alcott, are you? No, you're not. So check out Greystoke, Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes. Or whatever the heck this is called. I think I actually got that right, though. Have a terrific day.